What is up, everybody? Jumping right into today's episode, the track you just heard is from an electronic music producer known as Pixlr, Pixlr. He is, of course, as always, a friend of the podcast and was nice enough to share out a track at the beginning of today's episode. And the track that you just heard is titled Glow. That is off a 4-track release that can be found on Spotify, and the release track is, or the release title, is called Glow as well. Now, if you'd like to find more, as I mentioned, Spotify, you can find him at Pixlr, on SoundCloud at user-Pixlr, as well as on Instagram, if you'd just like to follow him there at Pixlr_55. Now, as always, if you would like your music shown out at the beginning of a podcast episode, I would be more than happy to do so. So reach out to me, chasing.creativity.podcast on Instagram and chasingcreativitypodcast at gmail.com if you'd like to reach out there. Now, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I am keeping these introductions short. So I'm not going to spend any more time talking about news and updates aside from a couple things. One, I do greatly apologize. My mic quality in this episode was not great. I don't know if that was a configuration I screwed up in recording. Maybe I selected the wrong USB port for recording and it was recording through some weird input. I do apologize. It's fine, but it just doesn't sound great. And I will say that moving forward, actually, any episode from here is going to be recorded in my new studio. So I am moving into a bigger place. I'll have a dedicated room to do episodes, and that will not happen again. So I do apologize, and thank you for bearing with that. And I hope you enjoy the episode regardless. It's not bad, but anyways, I was kind of annoyed with that. But that's it. I want to keep it very short. Of course, today's guest is Philip G. Anderson. He is, let me just take a step back and say this was just an amazingly interesting conversation. It ended up being, I think, over an hour and a half. So, I mean, we really got into it. He was so easy to speak with, such a cool guy. And I think we just had some really great conversation around the recent release of his, which I'll talk about in just a second, and the way he goes about making music and his whole path towards getting to where he is today. So it was really cool. To start out, a couple things about him. If you would like to listen to more music of his, you can find him on Spotify at Philip G. Anderson. That's Philip G. Anderson, Anderson. You can find him on Bandcamp if you'd like to go and support his music. He actually does have physical releases for the new album that he's selling there. So check that out. That comes out March 1st. So just after this episode airs, that album will be available. So you can find that at philipganderson.bandcamp.com. To speak more about this new release I'm speaking about, which is available on Bandcamp March 1st, it is titled Wilderness. Now, we talk about it today. It's a beautiful album that he has shared with me. So I got to listen to some tracks. We were talking about it in today's episode, and that, again, is released March 1st. So I highly recommend going, checking it out, supporting him. He's an extremely talented artist and musician. So, again, check it out. Awesome music. So we will be starting today's episode with a song that is from this release, and it's titled Olympic. So you'll get a sense of his music if you are unfamiliar with his music as we jump into the episode. And then, of course, as always, we'll jump right into the conversation. So that's where I'll leave it. Keeping it nice and short, jumping right into the importance of these podcasts, the conversation. So I do hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope to speak with you all again soon.
We are live. Philip G. Anderson, how's it going?
Good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah, dude. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Wow. As always, super excited to jump into this episode. It seems to be this new kind of change with the podcast. I'll almost say that it's forming into this modern classical ambient theme right now, which is really cool because you know a lot of these guys. I know you guys are all kind of in the same realm, so I'm really excited to get into this.
As am I.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. So we have a lot to talk about today. Stuff with the new album that I have heard. It's released March 1st, which we'll definitely get into. But to start things off, let's just go straight on back to when you started in music, how this whole thing kicked off, and start there.
Way back. All right.
Way back.
The earliest I remember is being a real little kid and always being fascinated by film scores and video game scores too, actually. I wasn't that into pop music, but anytime I heard this awesome film score, I'd go home, I'd download it, I'd listen to it on my iPod, I'd listen to it in a car. So that was kind of my first experience with music. And then from there, when I was in 5th grade, I joined like the school band as a percussionist, and then did that throughout middle school, high school, played in some rock bands with my friends as a drummer. And that was kind of my introduction to music. I never really knew what I wanted to do with it, but I always knew like, this is really cool. This is somehow going to be a part of my life. So then I went off to college, and I, to this day, have no idea why I did this. I went and declared as a mechanical engineering major.
Oh, dang. Okay.
I don't know why, but I was like, you know what? I should probably get a normal job and make actual money. So engineers get paid well. Why don't I do that? And then my first semester in college, I was just so depressed with what I was doing in classes. First of all, I was terrible at math and physics. And if you're going to be an engineer, you need to know that.
I did the same. Just to I don't mean to jump in here, but like I did those same courses. So I totally understand, man. Those were fucking grind. So sorry.
Yeah, it was awful. So I was like, why am I doing this? This is a terrible decision. I'm not happy doing this. The school I went to, Elon University, had a not brand new, but fairly new music technology program. And that was something I saw when I applied. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like maybe I can do that as a minor or something. So after that first semester, I switched over to a music technology major. And then for the rest of my time there, I was studying music production, recording,
cool.
All that fun stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so that was really cool and interesting. It gave me a nice background in the tech and production side of it. But the school didn't have any kind of composition major. They had some music theory classes, and I took a couple semesters of that. But as far as composing and arranging and orchestrating, they didn't have any classes like that. So I was like, throughout the process going, okay, I want to write music. I don't know if it's film music. I don't know if it's just pop music, but I want to write music. That's kind of when I discovered it. So I just stuck with the program. And then when I graduated, I was like, you know what? Let's do the whole move out to LA and become a film composer thing.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So like a month after I graduated, I moved right out to LA and started interning at a bunch of places. I started off at Hum Music, which unfortunately no longer exists. But that was a little commercial production house that did music for commercials. It was a really cool gig. I got to demo on the projects, and
that's awesome. Yeah.
It was really fun. That was actually a blast interning there. I never ended up landing any spots, but that's probably fair. Back then my music was pretty much crap. And then from there, I just started interning for a bunch of composers around the city. And I ended up in Hans Zimmer's facility, Remote Control Productions. Excuse me. I wasn't interning for him specifically, though. But I was in he has this huge facility in downtown Santa Monica. It's like multiple buildings, a whole bunch of studios, composer rooms.
Amazing. Holy shit.
So if you're like a gear nerd, holy crap, it's gear heaven. His room itself is unbelievable. But of course I was never allowed to go in there or touch any of the gear, so you know. But that was a really cool experience. I learned a lot of like the behind the scenes of film scoring and that whole industry. It was cool to see how things go from the composer working on the score and all the revisions and edits and kind of the tight deadlines they work around. Like
it's a factory over there. They just crank
Right,
out
right.
project after project.
What are the so there are of course groups of people working at that stage, right? So
Yeah.
what's that look like? Because you were more behind the scenes, as you mentioned. What is a typical project then looking like based on everyone involved? I mean, what's that look like?
So that's kind of hard to say. I mean, my role there was very much go get coffee, clean up the tables, bathrooms, typical LA intern stuff.
Yep.
But I got to know some of the assistants fairly well, and they were always constantly running notes from the composer to some other room so that this guy can edit this track or something like that. It was a big team of people working on one score, and that's cool to see, because prior to that, I thought the composer writes the score and then delivers it. And you have no idea that there's like editors behind the scenes and music supervisors and mix engineers, mastering engineers, recording engineers, assistants for all those people.
Right.
You just have no idea how big of a team there is with that.
That's so interesting because, I was under the impression, and I've had the chance to speak with a couple film composers, right? But they never really mentioned that scale that like they're, I guess loosely, but really to see your perspective where there's one person or maybe a group of people working on the composition itself, and then it's sent all over, just to like a mixing engineer, just to a mastering engineer. That's really interesting because, if you take a step back and look at where someone more starting out is, right? Someone has to do everything out of the gate. If you're working on a track, you're doing the composition, you're doing the mixing, you're doing the mastering, you're doing marketing, you're doing absolutely everything. And then as you get higher and higher and higher, it's very much more siloed, which is interesting.
Yeah. That's pretty much spot on. But so I was saying it was a good experience and it was really cool to do. But then after a while of doing that, I kind of realized this probably isn't the right track for me. Because one, I don't have that background in composing, and my skills aren't that strong yet. So how am I going to develop my abilities as an artist if 100% of my time I'm running and getting coffee for someone, or not working on music, not developing my own skills and ability?
Yep.
And so I just the vibe and timing felt right, so I left that and then moved to Chicago. After about 1.5 years, 2 years in LA. And then in Chicago is kind of where I started to get into modern classical music and developing as an independent artist and as a career in composing as well. That was where that's where the kind of interning and learning as like a kid stopped. And then, oh wait, now I'm actually acting as a professional and seriously pursuing this. Which seems weird to move away from Los Angeles to do that, but that's what I did.
Right. That's so interesting. So what is the time frame here? Because I saw you had music release on Spotify that was around 2016, like your first Spotify release. So is this still prior to that time frame, or where does that all sit in terms of releasing music? Is this more of like a learning kind of phase in your life where you're working in Chicago and you're learning this craft in terms of composing for yourself? And then the next stage is of course doing those single releases.
No, so I moved to Chicago in 2014. Okay. So those releases came, I think what was my first one? Winter EP. That was like my first EP as a modern classical artist. I put that out when I was living in Chicago, and that was very much inspired by the Chicago winters there.
Makes sense, yeah.
And I love winter. I love the imagery that comes with it: snow, ice, the cold weather. That's all wonderful. I actually like that. So I basically wrote an EP about it while I was there, and that was my first, in terms of composing, dive into modern classical music. What really caught my attention were, two pieces of music. They kind of drove me down that avenue. And the first was On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter, which is a beautiful piece of music. And then Flight from the City by Johan Johansson. Okay. Those two caught my attention. I listened to them nonstop. I thought they were some of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. And then from there, I started exploring more and more. I listened to all of their music, and then I started finding, now Olafur Arnalds, Nils Fromm, I've heard all of the other guys talking about this.
Everyone bet, yep.
I know.
Yep.
But so it started off with those two pieces and those two composers, and Johan Johansson still remains my favorite composer. Unfortunately, he passed away recently, so we won't get any new music from him, which is really sad.
Right.
But he's definitely my favorite composer, and what kind of tipped me off to this style of music.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool, man. So then did you find at this stage, I know a lot from LA into Chicago had to just be amazing in terms of what you had seen, and then also based on when you had been studying for coursework in music technology, did that really allow for this just awesome foundation to start really working on tracks at a compositional level? Because how I would imagine is if you went through that undergrad program in music technology, and I'm guessing there's like a lot of work within the DAW, mixing, mastering, things like that. So then when you kind of took that step to composing, once you're kind of finding this music, you're really inspired to work on your own music. It must have just been this really nice, a great foundation to move forward with that.
So the undergrad program didn't necessarily help with composing wise, because again, there was some basic music theory, but there wasn't a whole lot of compositional learning there. The tech background was cool though, because when I went into the studio to record pieces, I already kind of knew how I wanted things mic'd up and I wanted players sitting and all that. As far as learning composing, that's been the toughest thing, and I'm very much still learning, but that's pretty much self-taught. And most of that has come from just critically listening to other music. So like those two pieces I mentioned, On the Nature of Daylight, yes, I listened to it over and over as a fan because I loved the piece, but I would also sit there and analyze what each instrument is doing, the harmonies that are involved, how the melodic progression moves along. So I'm listening and learning from these pieces. And I think that's been the most valuable thing in developing my composing abilities, is actually listening to other people's music and trying to find out how they did it.
Right.
And so reading along with scores also helps too. Like I know how to read music, so I'll sit down with sheet music and look through and go, okay, this is what's happening here. This is the harmonic progression. Why does this sound good and this doesn't?
Right.
So it's dissecting other music is basically how I learned to write music.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And just to jump back again, just because I'm really interested in how this all progressed. But so you mentioned early on, middle school, high school, it was drums, playing in a band, no formal training. So when you're working on these tracks now, is this a learning process as well? Learning in terms of the instruments and as well the composition as well? That's incredible.
I see what you're saying. So I grew up drumming and had training in drumming. Like I took lessons all throughout school. But in terms of piano, I have never taken a single piano lesson in my life.
That's insane.
And it's really weird. I've gotten some people that say like, "Oh, you're a wonderful pianist," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm getting there, but not yet."
So when was the first? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but when was the first time you just played piano? I mean, was that?
So growing up, we had a piano in our home, and I would sit there and just noodle around on it. But it was very much playing with only my index fingers and kind of just banging on keys. Yeah. And I guess the first time I seriously started playing piano was in Chicago.
Wow,
I had a little MIDI keyboard to work on music with, and then I got a full 88 MIDI keyboard, and then I started actually practicing, because it was like, if I want to write this kind of music, I kind of need to know how to play piano.
Right.
So I would actually practice piano. I'd play my scales. I'd look up exercises online. I think I heard John Hayes in his interview with you said he did something similar where you'd go on YouTube and look up exercises. I very much do the same thing. And even like I'm still getting there. Even today, I wake up at around 5:15 in the morning and do an hour to an hour and a half of piano practice every weekday, because that's what I need to do to get there.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. And I love when I have the opportunity to speak with someone where you get that insight where it's extremely deliberate. Like to say every day I'm up at 5:15 and I'm working on this, like that's your schedule to go in and practice. That for me is really inspiring, because I think that's what leads to these kind of stories. You know, like you put in that time, you've had this really interesting path so far, but you're putting in the dedicated hours every morning working on that. And again, it leads to things like this. It's really cool.
Yeah. At first, it's really tough. Like when I started doing that schedule, the alarm would go off at 5 and I go, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And so I'd get up, practice, and after a couple of weeks, you don't really see any improvement. It's too short a time. But after doing this for months, a year, now I'm actually seeing I am exponentially better at piano than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that finally paying off. And it's nice to be able to actually play the pieces I'm writing.
Totally.
So the earlier pieces I wrote, I never recorded. But I would write these pieces and go, well, shoot, if I want to record them, I have to hire a piano player because I simply can't play them.
Right.
But now I'm able to write them and play them myself. So that's one, more rewarding, and two, saves on money so I don't have to hire a piano player.
Right. But it is so cool because today a person can sit in a DAW and so just, for comparison or I guess another example, I noodle around on a MIDI controller when I make piano. And so I kind of tried to make this kind of middle ground between deep house and piano, but the chords that come through in ideas that I'm working on a track, I wouldn't be able to play well enough on a keyboard to come up with that. Does that make sense? Like I feel much more comfortable in MIDI, right? So I'm clicking in MIDI. I'm like, okay, this needs to, switch to this chord. And then to ear, it sounds okay, right? But it's cool that is even a possibility today, right? So, you can sit in a DAW, you can have strings, you can have drums, you can have piano, you can have orchestra, pull everything together in Logic, and it sounds phenomenal, right? Using like Contact or something. But still, I guess what I'm getting at is it doesn't discredit anyone as a composer. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to go out and play physically on the piano. I think it's really cool that you're putting in the time to learn that. But I always bring this up, for example, but Deadmau5, he doesn't know how to play fucking piano at all. And he makes the basic music, you know? So it's just this weird balance between technology, a real standalone keyboard recording on a real, or not a keyboard, but a piano, a real standalone piano recording on a piano. It's almost like we're in this really interesting time for that reason.
No, I completely agree. I remember when I was right out of school, I had this mindset and vision that a composer is someone that is a master of an instrument and knows everything there is to know about music theory. And that was kind of debilitating because I didn't have that background. I didn't know how to play piano. So it was it was a lot of pressure and a lot of stress saying, oh, I'm not good enough to do this. Like I'll never learn this. But now I've kind of grown into the mindset of, at the end of the day, what makes someone a great artist or composer is the ideas they have. They don't have to be a phenomenal piano player. Some people may disagree with me on this, but I don't think you have to be able to be a master at any instrument or something like that to come up with incredible ideas and wonderful pieces of music that people are going to be moved by and enjoy.
Yep. Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that as a producer, someone should look at where they feel like they're coming up with their best ideas. If that's on the piano, awesome. Then spend the time learning on the. But if it's in the DAW, or if it's while you're taking a shower and melodies pop in your head, and then that ends up being the foundation for a great song, do that. Like do that thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Right now, I don't have a piano in my home. There's one at my parents' house back in Virginia, and I inherited it, but haven't found a way to move it down to where I am now in Georgia.
Right.
So I'm working on that. So everything I do is on the MIDI keyboard. So all my practicing on that is on that. All my writing is on that. But because of that, I can experiment with different instruments and basically an infinite amount of sounds at my fingertips through sample libraries and all that. But if I'm recording something, I still like to go out, find an actual piano or actual string players to do it as much as I can and as much as I can do with the budget that I have.
Right. Would you say then when you're sitting there and working on music and you're able to kind of, switch through these sound libraries with different presets or pads that you've written yourself or whatnot, that will act as this creative process because you can kind of hear the same chords in a different preset or a different pad, and that might trigger something to be like, oh, this could go in a different direction.
So yes and no. No, I'll explain what I mean.
Yeah.
So like when you get a new sample library, it's new to you. You're like, oh, these sounds are amazing.
Right.
So you get inspired. You play something that you've played 100 times on a piano, and then you play it on this really cool library, and you're like, this is new. I can come up with so many new ideas on this. But after a while of doing that over and over, those sounds become old. They become less inspiring because you're used to them. And at the end of the day, they're the same. If it's a real instrument library, it's the same sampled performance over and over again.
Yeah.
So yes, at first it can be really exciting and really inspiring to use a new library and come up with all these new ideas. But then after a while, you start thinking, I've already heard this before. I want to try something else, but these are the only sounds within this library to use. And that's where I think the advantage of having a real instrument comes into play, because you can't really change the sound of a, let's just say, piano library. It was recorded one way. That's it. That's how it's going to sound. Sure, you can EQ it and compress it and do all these things. But if you have an actual instrument, you can change the way the piano's mic'd. You can throw felt on it. You can put a mic underneath it. You can put paper between the hammers and the strings. You can do a ton of things to change the tone and character of it that you can't do in a library.
Yeah. So you can get something that's completely unique in that scenario based on the actual piano, the actual place you have it set up, what you're doing to it, felt, paper, whatever. And that in itself is going to kind of keep it, it's still a piano. So it's keeping it, it's subject to what a piano sound can deliver, but then you can kind of have this expansion based on how you mic it, how you set it up. Yeah.
And you can even move it around the room, try it in a different room, get some interesting sounds that way. But again, you can't do all that with a sample library. And I don't want to sound like I'm trying to knock sample libraries, because I use them a ton, and especially for the client work I do, I have to use them. But for where I'm trying to go with music, I want to get more into using live, real instruments and players to create a unique and different sound. And that's where the disadvantage comes if you're only using sample libraries.
Totally. Yeah. No, I agree. So as we were talking, this was a couple weeks ago, you mentioned that as you're looking to build out this unique sound, right? Because you mentioned having this, as you project forward, looking to think about the sound you want to build out, the instruments you want to use, the people you want to be able to incorporate in the tracks that you're recording. How are you looking to develop that unique sound, or how have you found that over time?
Oh,
it's a hard question. I don't mean to
hard question.
It's totally hard. I know, but because when I listen to your music, I hear like a lot of emphasis with strings, and also in a couple tracks, I heard almost it seemed like muted guitar riffs in a couple. One being, I have it here on the winter, or excuse me, Sunrise.
Yeah,
I believe
Sunrise.
Yeah, exactly. So that track in particular, I almost felt like it was cool, and I want to let you kind of speak to where you're going with that album. But I get the sense that you're developing this unique sound through those types of, it's almost film scoring, but with this addition of like a little bit of guitar, which I thought was super cool, and then this emphasis on strings as well. It's not necessarily guitar, but it was like muted riffing a little bit. It was like so subtle, but go ahead. Yeah.
You're making me think now. I'm trying to remember what I used on that track. I don't think there was any guitar on that. I know there was One Piece Wind where I used finger picking acoustic guitar very subtly in the background, but I'm pretty sure nothing else on that EP had guitar. So I'm not really sure what the sound was.
I think I picked it up in Wind and Sunrise. Regardless, Sunrise was like a beautiful track. I thought that ending that album with that was just phenomenal, but
thank you.
Maybe I picked up something else that sounded like this muted, like almost arpeggiated addition to the track, but but I'll let you speak to it. I mean,
sure.
I don't mean to, yeah.
So yeah, I guess my focus now is I'm more interested in working with strings than piano. For some reason, I favor that instrument. I think I just enjoy the tone of strings more. I think there's more expressiveness, more emotion you can get out of strings than you can out of piano. So almost every track I've written so far has strings in it. There are a few that are just solo piano, but I always try to write with strings and then to develop my own sound, I'm starting to learn after doing recording sessions and working with live players how I like things performed, how I like them mic'd, what kind of room I like them recorded in. So that's, I think, the process of developing your own sound is, all right, I've kind of picked the instrument that I love working with the most and that I get that really fits the compositions I'm writing.
Right.
So now I'm developing the sound of that instrument to fit what I'm thinking of in my mind for these pieces. That may not have been the best way to explain that, but
no, it is. And it's always a hard question to answer. I mean, I think it's fascinating that even within one genre, you pick the genre, right? Deep house, electronic, electro focus, techno, whatever. It's the subtleties in that genre that an artist will bring to the table that's unique to themselves that makes them a unique artist, right? That makes that unique sound. And it's the same, of course, for modern classical. And I think it's amazing. I actually hadn't thought of this, that just the way you will think about miking or placement in a room will add to that unique approach. I mean, it makes sense. It's almost like for me, I feel stupid because it's like a duh, almost. but it's fascinating, really, because like just based on how you approach that, you have this idea in your mind, as you mentioned, and how you approach it within the room, how it's mic'd, all these different things is going to lead to that sound. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think having that background in tech and recording kind of contributed to that. I could see how maybe if you don't have any experience recording or working with microphones, preamps, and all that, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, what's the best place to position this microphone, or what room do I want to record this in? So I think having that background kind of helped me there, or at least put that thought in my mind that this is something I need to focus on when producing these pieces. And so a good example of this is my piece Close, which I think is my latest release and Told, the new album. Yeah. That one, I recorded a 4-piece string ensemble. It was 3 violins and 1 cello in this really small studio back in Chicago. And we positioned, and this was all part of the thought process prior to it. The whole piece is a very intimate, close, reflective piece. So I wanted the recording techniques to reflect that. So we positioned them in a half circle in the middle of the studio room, put individual mics on every instrument about a foot above the strings. And then we had a stereo mic right in the middle of the half circle, about 6 feet up in the air above them. And that was all we used to mic them. There wasn't anything farther away. There weren't really wide stereo pairs. It was just the mono close mics and then a stereo pair right above the ensemble. And the tone that we captured was just perfect. I was like, this is exactly what I was looking for prior to recording it. And it's nice because the close mics capture all the little detail of the individual players performing. And then the stereo mic right above them captured the sound of the instruments in the room. And because it was a small room, it has a small room sound to it. And that's exactly what I was trying to capture in that piece.
Oh, that's so cool. That's because I think that people without that background would totally focus on the composition, right? And then get to that moment where they're like, okay, I'm going to go record it, and just not have any idea. I personally, I wouldn't have thought of it. It's to think about that in almost a creative and analytical way as to how exactly you want the sound to come through. So let's think analytically about how we're going to mic this, right? I mean, I wouldn't have done that. So that is cool. That's awesome that you have that background. So now you can almost hear in your mind when you're working on a composition how you want it to sound tonally. And then once you know what you want that to come through as for the listener, you know how to go and execute it in terms of recording, which is cool.
Yeah, that's I was going to use another example, the piece I released prior to Close, which was called Portraits. That is a perfect example for that because it's the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I wrote this piece for 5 string players, 2 cellos, a viola, and 2 violins. And I wanted a big, grand sound, not a tiny little room sound for that piece.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, how do I do this on a budget? So this was recorded in Chicago as well. And there was a church that was on the same block as my apartment. So I just reached out to them. I was like, hey, what are the chances I can record some music in your church? Cool. And they were like, oh, yeah, absolutely. We just charge like this little tiny fee to rent out the space for a little bit. And I was blown away because I was thinking I was going to have to record it in some big concert hall. And the research I was doing for those were like thousands of dollars.
Right.
I just can't afford that. Yeah. So fortunately, we got the church, and a recording engineer I knew there, I hired him to record that session. And we had a similar player setup where we had 5 players in a half circle right at the front of the church. We had individual microphones on each player, but then about, I want to say 10 feet out from the half circle, we had a stereo pair. And then probably 25 feet back deep into the church, we had another stereo pair that was pointed a little up. And that captured the whole sound of the church, all the reverb, the long decay time. And that was perfect for it, because I barely had to use any reverb when I was mixing it. In fact, I think I only have a tiny little bit on some of the individual close mics. But for the most part, all the reverb that you hear on that track is the natural reverb of the church.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was another thing when I was writing it. I was thinking, okay, I have 5 string players, but I want something that sounds bigger than 5 string players. Yeah. How do I do that? I got to find a space that's going to make it sound bigger than that. So the church ended up working out really well.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so cool. So I guess I haven't thought about that in the past, but then you're picking up the reverb just based on miking that whole entire room, just pulling him back 20 feet. As you mentioned, pointing him up and catching that whole space. That has to make it so fun and exciting as a composer and producer to be able to move into that realm too, because you're not only thinking of what you have to your disposal in, Logic or Pro Tools or whatever it is, whatever the DAW you use, because there's reverb there, right? People can pull in reverb, but now you have this whole added arsenal, if you will, to your disposal in terms of miking and recording, picking up natural reverb from the room, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool too, because that room sound is only that room. That can't, like, with the reverb plugins, you can create all these different reverbs, but no one can create that room sound because that one room is itself, if that makes sense. Like, I captured only what that sound is. I don't think you could replicate it exactly with a reverb plugin. I may be wrong, but it would probably be really hard.
It'd be very hard. Yeah. And you're now making this point in time that's you. Like, you did that. Like, that's your composition. They recorded it in that space. That's it. As you mentioned, it's like that room made that sound and that's it. Versus if you're sitting in the DAW and you're using, say, Contact and then whatever common reverb, right? I use like Valhalla Room. I don't know if you're familiar with Valhalla, but anyways, right? So, but everyone has a reverb. So really, it's unique in a sense through the composition and through how you chain different things together, whatnot. But someone could do that same exact tonal replication. It would be the same. Like, it's not unique in that scenario. But this, when you get to sit there and set this all up, it's 100% unique.
Yeah, that was thinking back on it. That was probably the most fun I've ever had as a composer, was working on that recording session. Yeah, I very specifically remember afterwards, once we packed up everything, everyone's left. I went and met my girlfriend at a, I guess you could call it lounge bar in Wicker Park in Chicago. And we just got a couple of glasses of wine, and I had this huge endorphin rush. And I was just like, I've never been happier than when I just completed this project. It was incredible. It was a blast to work with those live players. They all did an incredible job. It was wonderful to work with. Andy Shoemaker was the recording engineer on that. He's the recording engineer at Rax Tracks Recording in Chicago. He did a phenomenal job on it as well. And it was so cool to see something like that come to life from this little idea I had months ago, and thinking, oh, this is probably going to be too difficult to do. I have to hire all these string players, rent out a space, get a recording engineer. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. Do I really want to do this? And at the end of that process, all of that paying off, I had such an amazing feeling. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is all I want to do.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And you're right. That must be just so exciting to have, especially the people come together, when people believe in the idea you have behind a track and to say, yeah, absolutely, I'll do this. I'll work on this project with you. I mean, that in itself, to have people on your side and say, screw it, let's do this. That's so exciting too. The whole thing together is amazing.
It was, yeah. I think the people are what made that project, not just the musicians and all that I just described, but there was also the film component of that project where I created a short film with a cinematographer, excuse me, friend of mine named Eric Waldron. We went to high school together, and he lives in LA, and he actually flew to Chicago to film it for me. And I was like, holy shit. I covered his flight, but I was like, I can't really offer you much more than that. I'm sorry. But he's a great guy, and he flew up and filmed that for me. And all of the people in that film were just people that I knew around the city. Some of them were from my part-time bartending job when I was working there. Some of them were just friends of friends. And they all came and worked on this project. And it was so cool to see all these people coming together to bring this one little idea I had to life.
Right. Dude, that's so cool, man. That's amazing. And yeah, just as you mentioned, having the people on board and having people like that believe in your project, or just out of the kindness of their heart too, just being like, yeah, totally. Like that's so cool. And then they come out of it and said, hey, look what I was part of here with this track, whether it's cinematography, as you mentioned, or the string players, the recording engineer, whatever. I mean, it was this collaborative experience. So yeah, that's just super cool. So I'm guessing that you have moving forward a lot more plans for that type of experience.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
I would imagine.
Yeah. Not just for the recording and the music side, but also for all these projects that I do now. I really want to incorporate some kind of film element. I just enjoyed that as well so much. And that was such a centerpiece of that track, Portraits, and it's going to be a very big part of my upcoming album. And a lot of the people that helped with previous projects are now helping with this. The editor that worked on Portraits is currently editing some of the videos for the new album.
Awesome.
The cinematographer from Portraits, Eric, was supposed to fly with me to do all the filming for this, but he got sick at the last minute, so he couldn't make it.
Shit.
But it worked out because a friend of his came along instead and ended up doing all the shooting. But it was really cool. It was cool and funny and nerve-wracking because I get the call the night before we're supposed to fly out to go film. That he's not going to come. And I go, oh crap. And he's like, don't worry, my friend Grant is still going to make it. He'll meet you there. So I'm flying. We were up in the Pacific Northwest shooting. So I'm flying from Atlanta to Seattle going, I'm so nervous. I've never met this guy before. One of my good friends from high school isn't coming. Oh no, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It ended up working out. But that was a really funny and nerve-wracking experience.
Yeah, I would bet, man. And again, that just speaks to like this whole community, because how cool that he got sick and he's like, oh, my buddy's coming down. I mean, what you have good friends. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
For real.
So I hope Grant, the cinematographer I ended up working with, listens to this, because holy crap, that was 100% respect. I can't believe he did that. Just flew up to film a project for someone he's never met before. Like that was an incredible move.
Awesome.
Thank you, Grant.
Hell yeah, that is super cool. That's super cool. But so this was all for the new album.
Yes.
So there's a lot. Okay, yeah. So why don't we start digging into that a bit? Because I got to listen to it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. So this comes out pretty soon, right? March 1st?
Yeah, next Friday, March 1st. Release on basically everywhere you can listen to music.
Yep. So versus previous music that you've released, what were you looking to express through this album? Or what exactly well, let's just start there. Yeah, what were you looking to try and address with the new release?
Yeah, so to start off, basically every time I write or start a new project, I'm always trying to convey some idea or story. I always want to have some meaning in the music I write, and that's very true with Portraits and with Close. And so this upcoming project, I started out basically doing all of my composing, all of my work in my bedroom in my apartment in Chicago. And it's this tiny, tiny little room. You basically can fit a bed and a desk in it, and that's it. It's dark. It's got puke green painted walls.
Oh no.
It's a super depressing room. And all I'm thinking about is, man, this is a really crappy room. I don't want to be in here. I want to be out. I want to go hiking somewhere. I want to go explore somewhere, not be in this room. So I started writing these pieces that were inspired by basically imagery of mountains, forests, rivers, basically where I wasn't. So going off that, I was thinking, how about I create a project that gets me out of this room and hopefully inspires others to do the same. So I started basically writing a soundtrack for exploring the wilderness. And that's the title of the album, Wilderness. So I wrote 10 pieces. I describe them as a blend between modern classical, cinematic, and ambient elements. And I haven't quite heard anything out there right now that sounds just like it, which is good, but also incredibly nerve-wracking because who knows if people are going to like it. And so going back to creating this project, during that process, I also thought, okay, I want to have a film and photography element to this project as well. So after writing these tracks, I got in touch with my friend Eric, who I'd mentioned before, saying, hey, let's collaborate again. You want to fly somewhere and shoot all these nature videos and all, take a bunch of photos and all for this project? And so we started planning that. And the imagery that I had in my mind was that imagery of the Pacific Northwest region. It's these forest-covered mountains, fog and clouds slowly rolling over the trees, a kind of mysterious nature wilderness imagery. So I have relatives that live in Seattle, so I decided, okay, I'll fly up there with my friend, we'll stay with them, we'll go out every day and shoot a bunch of footage, take a bunch of photographs. And that's basically what Grant and I ended up doing when he flew up, is we were up there for 6 days, and every day, sunrise to sunset, we were out filming for this project, and we got a ton of footage, a ton of photographs, compiled it all together, working on editing the videos for it now. And so there will be 3 videos for 3 of the tracks in it, and then there will be a ton of photographs that I'll feature on my website as well. And going back to the original idea of the project was I wanted to write music that got me out of this room and hopefully inspired others to do the same. So I'm hoping people will listen to this music, yes, on a cool sound system that sounds amazing so they can hear every detail, but I'm also kind of hoping people listen to it in headphones while they're out in a park or some local forest that they can walk through, so that they're getting away from what I was trying to escape, which is the dark, everyday grind, screens, our phones, just the noise and distractions that we're all surrounded by every day. I wanted to get away from that, so I created this project to do that, and I'm hoping it inspires other people to do the same. No, I think that's really, really amazing, and I think you would agree, and I think that this is across the board with people that work on music, that when you're sitting there working on an idea, right, whether it's in a DAW or if you're on a piano or wherever it is, whatever it is that you're using to write music, that moment when you start coming up with an idea that's unique and you really love it and you're like, okay, I have something, I want to start moving with this and seeing what track I want to layer on this or where I want to take it, you are so drawn into that moment with that track that your surroundings, wherever you're sitting, whether it's your bedroom, it's your living room, you're in a studio, whatever, that isn't there. Like, that's how I feel when I'm working on music, is it just disappears, you know? And so you probably, as you mentioned, kind of experiencing this in a sense where you want to kind of transcend yourself to this other location and have these strong visuals of the Pacific Northwest while you're working on music. Well, when you're sitting there in the DAW and things are really coming together with some of these tracks, I'm guessing you really feel removed from your current location, right? Oh yeah, absolutely. I would get a little too sucked into the writing sessions. Way too many hours would go by and I'd realize, oh crap, I haven't eaten lunch or dinner. It's now 1 a.m. Which is good because I have that intense focus and I'm really into what I'm doing, but it's bad because, you know, you miss meals, you don't go to sleep, it messes with you a little.
Oh, I totally understand. And just having prior conversations on this podcast or with friends who also make music, I mean, it's like this common sentiment where you can just get so sucked into a project. It's addicting. It's 100% addicting. I mean, I think sometimes I take the moral high ground because I'm like, when I'm home working on hobbies, I work on music. But I mean, people can be just as addicted to gaming. You know, you can sit and just obsess over gaming. I'm sitting in front of my computer obsessing over music. You know, it's that same just total engagement. Now, there's something coming out of it, which I think is probably beneficial, right? That's what I like to, you know, there's something on the other end. There's a product that's done, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that it's so interesting because you as this musician can remove yourself, totally engage in this music while you're working on it, and remove yourself. And now the idea is that when people listen to the music, they also have this chance to kind of remove themselves too. You know, that's as I've got from you kind of the idea. Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate hope for it. Is that it provides that for people. 'Cause it did for me. And it was such a demanding and time consuming project. Like, this is the most amount of time and, quite frankly, money I've ever spent on a project. So it's exciting but nerve wracking to see if it's gonna, like, if people are gonna like it again. It's tough. I guess going to how I actually recorded it and all. I did all the writing when I was in Chicago, and I had planned to record it there, but then basically ran out of time before I moved down to Georgia, where I am now. So that was extremely stressful because I had my network in Chicago. I knew the musicians that I like to work with. I knew the recording engineer, the studios I like to work in.
Right.
And then I get down here and go, oh crap, I don't know a single violin player. I don't know a single recording studio. I have no idea how to get in touch with these people.
Yeah. But what moved you to Georgia? Sorry, I don't mean to...
Say again?
What moved you to Georgia to make that change from Chicago to Georgia?
I moved down here with my fiance. She got a job down here, so I just moved with her because
being
a composer, you can basically work from wherever.
Right. Okay, yeah. No, I was just interested because that is very fascinating, right? You had this network in Chicago, so yeah, okay. Sorry, didn't mean to jump in.
No worries, it's fine. Shoot, where was I here? Oh yeah, I get down here. I'm having a mini panic attack because I have no idea how to get this done, and it's already been a ton of time on this project. But fortunately, a connection through my fiance is the head of the local county arts association here.
Ooh.
And so I got to know her, Bunsey Lanners, and she recommended string players for me because they teach cello and violin lessons to all the kids in the county here.
Oh, cool.
So because of that contact, I met these string players. And then also through that contact, I was able to record in the Performing Arts Center here in town, which was incredible because that's a room built for music. It's
awesome.
Not some just square room. It's literally built to have music performed in it. So I brought all my own gear in. We set up for a couple of days and just recorded the string parts in there for that, all through this wonderful connection I had through basically my fiance down here.
Wow. How cool is that?
And that's going back to just people being willing to work on a project, not even really knowing you.
Right.
Just right off the bat. And that was another incredible experience because the musicians did another wonderful job, and it was a blast to work with them and record live again.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's so cool because you took kind of a leap of faith, right? You're following your fiance, moving to a new city. As you mentioned, you don't have the connections. You don't know anyone there, right? But how cool that you took this leap of faith almost, and then what a fortuitous event that your girlfriend had connections that just the whole thing like exploded.
Yeah,
you
no
know?
kidding. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have those connections. I probably wouldn't be releasing the album this upcoming Friday. That's for sure.
Yeah, but that's cool, man. I think that I think there's some. I love those stories. I think that's the best way to put it because it's just so fascinating when things seem to click like that. You know. I don't think it's just luck. It's interesting. And
that's kind of what I like most about music, I think, is that human connection aspect to it, working with other people. Like it's fun to sit at the computer here with a keyboard and write music, but it's way more fun to create that music with other people in a live recording environment and create these projects with a bunch of different people that are all just giving their time and effort to making this one little idea come true. That's where the connection comes in. That's what really makes it special and why I enjoy doing it so much.
Right. Yeah, it's not this solo act. It's this collaborative experience, and just as exciting it is for you to have these people come and work with you, they're excited to say, man, this guy's making beautiful music and I get to work. And it's this synergy, you know, It's just, oh man. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So do you think now, I mean, I know you're new to Georgia, but do you feel like this is going to be the place where you kind of settle and you're building these kind of friendships now, and this is going to be where you sit and make a lot of awesome music?
I think so. I hope so. But I have lived in 3 different cities in the past like 6-7 years, so who knows? Yeah. But I think it is, and I like the experiences I've been having so far here with musicians and people. Yeah. Recently, I was in Atlanta recording a piece for Piano Day, and I was working with a new recording engineer in a new studio, and that was a great experience. I'll definitely go back there. So it was nice. It's nice to start basically building a new musician network and creative network here in Georgia. Yeah,
it's cool, man. Because what I found with this podcast, right? So I think people get the misconception that you have to be in LA, right? You gotta be,
yes.
Right? But when I started doing this podcast, everyone's just everywhere. There's not, I've done maybe 2 episodes with three episodes with people in LA, and this is going to be like the 28th episode, you know? Mm-hmm. So most people, because I think now, I think it's a little bit skewed for electronic music because everything's done in the DAW. So then you can really just be solo in the middle of nowhere and put out music if you want. Or, you know, for just like purely working in like say deep house or techno or whatever. But I think that's changing a bit, that you don't have to be in these huge cities that are known as music hubs, because you can pass music around if you need, right? You can send projects around to different people. You can have a collaborative experience just like that. You don't have to be in these, you can meet the people in LA, but by still sending music when you're sitting in Georgia, you know, it's amazing for that reason.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree. And we're definitely going to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
that was 100% my mindset right out of school. It's like, I want to be a film composer. I have to move to Los Angeles right now. And that's the only way to do it. And then I get there. I'm struggling. I'm not developing my own abilities. I'm saying, okay, maybe this isn't the right move. I'm not really sure if this is the right path to go on. I move away from LA. And that's when things start picking up. That's when I actually start doing composing work for films, for TV, for video games, trailers. That's when I start doing the client work, and also when I start developing my career as an artist as well. Yeah. So it was funny. In the span of only like 1 to 2 years, I took a complete 180 on my original idea where it's like, move to LA, be a film score composer. That's it. Right, and then I leave LA and go, oh, wait, you don't have to be there. And 2, you can save a ton of money because that city is crazy expensive.
Yeah.
And you can pursue the same career somewhere else and potentially have a better experience.
Yeah. Now, so to dig in there a bit, when you're working on film or television commercials, are those local studios, or are you sending music to other places? Are you getting contracted to work with someone in, say, LA or a different state or different city, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Now that I've left LA, most of the work I do is for people and companies in LA.
See, that's so fun. Yeah, that's what I thought it would be. That's so ridiculous.
So right now, I guess the most work I do, and I guess best isn't the right word for it, but I'll say most enjoyable and most well-paying work I do right now is probably the music I write for TV. And that I got because I interned with a guy, a friend of mine actually named Dario, at Hans Zimmer's studio in LA. And then a few years later, he started doing a bunch of music for TV and brought me on to help him with that. Yeah. And now I'm writing tracks for TV shows. Like right now we're working on, what's it called? A lot of music for Crisley Knows Best.
Okay.
Which is on USA Network. We're working on Gordon Ramsay's show, 24 Hours to Hell and Back on Fox.
That's insane.
So it's crazy.
Insane.
It's like a couple years ago, I would have thought, I have no idea how to get that kind of work. And now I'm
Right.
like, I have that kind of work because I just happened to intern with a guy this one time in LA.
Yeah, dude. Oh, that's so funny. And I live by this, man. I really believe that when you are doing what you like, you love, right? You're going on your path. You say, I want to work in film, and that's it. Like, you didn't stick to mechanical engineering in the beginning. Like, you stuck to what you want to do. These things happen, man. It's like these fortuitous events where you're putting in the time, right? You're working really, really hard at it. It's not just going to come out of nowhere, but you didn't have to go and get that degree in something that you didn't necessarily love. Like, you stuck true to yourself, worked super damn hard. And then look, I mean, this stuff is just, it's happening. It's amazing.
It's also something you can't really plan for.
Yeah.
Like, starting off, it's super stressful because you say, I have no idea how to get to where I want to be. And I also want to say, just to be clear, like, I'm not a super successful composer yet. I still work a part-time job to get extra money.
Right.
Like, I'm still breaking into that.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that all of this hard work, all these hours of practice, all these hours of critically listening to other music to learn composing techniques is starting to pay off, because the opportunities that are coming, however they arrive, whether it's just a random connection or someone hears my music and says, I like your music, I want to work with you. It's incredibly rewarding to see that work pay off.
Yeah.
And that's not something you can plan for. Again, I couldn't have said, okay, I'm going to go intern here because I'm going to meet this guy. Like,
meet this guy.
How the hell am I going to know that's going to happen?
Right. Okay, so here's my question. Okay, So this is a heated debate between my girlfriend and I.
Uh-oh.
So
I don't want to piss anyone off.
I'm an optimist, she's a pessimist, but we kind of meet in the middle somehow. So, okay. My thought is this. So when you start out and you're saying, okay, I'm going to go to LA and I want to be a film composer, and you start interning and you meet some people, and this has blossomed into this path that one day has led you to composing today, right? And it's opening up into your composing with film, and this is like the door's opening right now, in my opinion. Do you think that, I know, I believe it, seriously. So, but do you think that, my question is this, if I said this story to my girlfriend, she'd say, oh, well, that person's just really like, this is one lucky person and 10,000 people will not make it. They won't do it, right? My question is this: do you think that the people that don't make it might have stopped right there? Like, they start in LA and then they intern, it doesn't really work out, and they're like, screw it, man, I'm just going to go and get this mechanical engineering degree, I'm going to go back to school, and that's it. Do you think that the fact that you just kept on this path, kept persevering, you have allowed yourself to be in this group of people that are doing exactly what they want to do? It's a hard question, I know, but I have this debate with my girlfriend all the time.
That's actually a really easy question. Yes, I 100% agree. Because I've seen people that I started out with who just, after like a year or 2 years, just gave up and switched to something else. I've absolutely seen that. So yes, I think if you have to have talent, you have to work extremely hard, and you have to be a little lucky. But if you keep at it, again, I'm still working towards it, but I'm seeing rewards and the payoff coming. So I think yes, if you just stick with it long enough, it will work out. Again,
I believe
hopefully,
that.
still working
I really
towards
do.
it.
No, I totally do, because I think over time you're going to just find yourself in a smaller and smaller group by people that keep working. Some people get married and then they get a job, whatever. I mean, like, as you mentioned right off the bat, people it didn't work out with right away, they just kind of do something else, right? So over time, you're going to find yourself in this smaller and smaller and smaller group, and everyone will know each other. You'll be this group of people, and then someone 10 years from now will say, Philip, how do you do this? Where do I even start? How do I make this happen? And you'll say it. It's like perseverance, working extremely hard and a little bit of luck. But I really truthfully believe that it's that group of people that just continually try, and something clicks, man. You meet the right person, two people meet, they start collaborating on something, it clicks, it turns into this, that becomes something else, and then boom, that's how these things happen.
Another thing, you kind of have to be ready to suffer too. And I mean that, I remember I had a job when I first got to LA because I had to make rent money and all this stuff, and I was working insane hours as a post-production assistant, like 18, 19-hour days, 6 days a week. And then, yeah, I was suffering. It sucked.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I kind of developed a better work ethic from that, and maybe became a stronger person from that is allowing me to handle that kind of struggle, that kind of suffering, not having a steady paycheck now as an independent musician, not really knowing when the next thing's going to come. It's not easy. Like, I think hard work is hard work, but it's easy to work hard, if that makes sense. Or at least for me, I can work hard because I want to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to be in situations where you're struggling, working these crazy hours to make rent, and doing all these other things just to survive. That's not easy.
Yeah. Well, and to that same point, I think that when you were doing those crazy 16, 18-hour days, you also have to be creative in a sense of how you're looking at what's going on in the moment, because someone might say, okay, I'm going to stick it through, and I'm just going to keep doing this. And that actually might not be the right path. That may not allow that person enough time to go and work on composition at night, practice piano. There just might not be enough hours in the day. So I'm sure at that point you were being very very objective in that moment of saying, okay, this is cool, but I'm not getting time to work on my music. I'm not getting or learn to do what you really want to be doing. And you made a change. So that's also really critical, is to be self-aware enough, to be objective enough to say, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like the right path. I need to switch it up a little bit to realign myself and do really what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember thinking, all right, cool. I could probably make all these incredible connections living and working here, but why the hell would anyone want to work with me if my music is crap? Like, if I don't have the ability, it doesn't matter how many connections I have.
Right.
So if I'm spending all of my time working for all these other people and not developing my own abilities, there's not really a point.
Yep.
Or at least that's how I saw it.
Exactly. And at that point, you were being objective with yourself. Someone might be in that same scenario and say, oh, my music's fine. I'm meeting all the right people, and that just might not be the right path. You're being objective, saying, okay, you were really seeing it clearly, excuse me. And that allowed for these next decisions.
So, yeah. And something you just said there made me think of this quote. I don't remember who I heard it from, but they said, in today's music industry, being incredibly talented is the bare minimum. Yeah. Yeah. And that's always stuck with me.
Totally. Dude, I couldn't agree more, because listening to you guys, like this world of modern classical composers, and then also my interest in deep melodic house and electro, the bar is so damn high, man. And there are guys out there, there are kids out there that are producing 10 hours a day. That's all they do.
Yeah.
13-year-olds. They just fucking produce all day.
No, I absolutely agree. And so there's two ways I think of this. And a good example is, hopefully he listened to this, Philip Daniel just released a new track, and he's got his new album coming out this Friday. And after I heard his recent single, I went, holy shit, that's so good. Like, I don't think I could do that. Like, this is so good. Is my music this good? And it's one of those things where you think, is it as good as this? And then I have the other thought, no, that's not what matters. It's not about being as good as it. My music is different from this piece.
Yep.
So I was thinking, like, I was trying to compare it to his piece, which is a terrible idea. You should not do that with your own music.
Yes.
And then I was like, no, it's my music's still good. It's different.
Yep. 100%. Because that's a red flag. Like, I think if you find yourself listening to one genre or one artist, especially one artist, and be like really picking it apart, in the sense that you're like, okay, is mine good enough? How can I? Oh, it's going to be a train wreck, because you can't emulate someone else's sound because that's their unique sound. You need to learn from it and appreciate it, but then trash it and don't listen and just focus on. And I don't mean to you, I just mean in general to people out there listening, and what I've experienced and what you're expressing. It's like that's I found in myself, and I think other people mention it. That's like it's such an easy mindset to get into, but I love how you express that, because it's dead on. Like, you have to step away and say, no, like, I'm doing my own thing. It's different. I need to get really fucking good at the thing I'm doing, you know?
Yeah. Well, it can also be just incredibly debilitating if you're sitting there going, my music isn't as good as this music. You're never going to get anywhere if you do that, because you're always going to feel like you're failing, you're not improving. Someone's always going to be able to produce a better sounding track than you, but you have to find your sound, your style, your voice, and make that the best you can. You shouldn't compare your sound to someone else's, because that's just a waste of time. If someone wants to listen to this specific sound, they're going to go listen to that artist.
They're going to go listen to that. Yeah.
Like, why the hell would they?
And the craziest part of all of it is, if, say, someone gets really good and mimics that sound, it won't be fulfilling. If people like that track, you'll be like, but if you do if you make you let your voice come through, you do exactly what you want to do, and people like that, then super fulfilling, right? I mean, that's when you get that feedback from artists or from fans. You're like, oh, that takes it to the next level.
Yeah. So going off of that, it's bringing that in connection to the scoring work I do for film and TV and all that. It's the projects I enjoy most are the ones where I have the most creative freedom, which is very rare. But that allows me to kind of infuse my own sound and style into the project.
Yeah.
But what most often happens is you get a very strict style guideline and very strict reference tracks you have to adhere to. And a lot of people have heard this before, other composers. It's always sound like Hans Zimmer. We want the Inception wahs. We want want this specific sound. And like, I'm happy to do that, but it's just more enjoyable when you're working on a project where the client is saying, you know what, let's work in some of your style, because that's a unique sound on its own.
Yeah. Well, everyone wants to write Inception too. Yeah. Like they're
an awesome soundtrack, so I'm not surprised, but like
yeah. Oh, and I just mean the film too. You know, they've done the film, and they want it to be at the level of Inception. So they're like, okay, well then the music has to be like, you know?
Yeah, so, it's like, cool, well, give me a couple $1 million to go record like a 70, 80 piece orchestra in like a massive hall. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be awesome.
I know, right? Please give me that money so I can do that.
Yeah. It must be fun. And one thing I did want to ask, because I was glad you brought all this up with moving into film, and you had mentioned that a lot of that was based on this connection you had made earlier on. What would you say for those people out there starting out? I mean, so if you were to go back and do this again from the start, and I guess the reason I ask this is for people that aren't living in LA, you know, middle of the country or a different country, different state, whatever. What does that look like for you? Would you say, I mean, kind of put in your licks in LA for a while and it is useful, or is it more you can do it all from your bedroom? It just depends on sending the music to the right people, developing your sound, getting that sound out there.
I'm honestly not sure. I don't really think I'm in a position to truly answer that question yet. So like, I'll say the way I've done it so far, I'm happy with. And at this point, I don't think there's anything I'd change, or at least I can't think of anything that I say, oh, I wish I did that instead of that. So it's a great experience to be out there living, interning, learning. But because I'm still working towards that goal and I'm still young in my career, I'm not really sure if I can give that advice yet. Like, I know that sucks. I'm sorry I can't answer that more. I still don't really know.
No. I totally understand. And it's kind of a stupid question as an interviewer, because I've heard across the board when I will listen to interviews with famous composers or whatever, and when people ask, hey, how do I do this? How do you do it? Usually the question is, I don't know.
I've heard that, because I've asked that question to composers and they go, I have no idea. You figure it out.
Right. So it is this process of figuring it out, but I do, you know what? Yeah. I mean, taking a step back, it might not even be as important about that specific question. The people out there that are maybe, you know, younger in their career and aspiring to do something like this, just this conversation is enough to kind of put them in that direction of thinking like, okay, well, this is how, you know, Philip did it. Where does that put me? What exactly do I want to do? How do I want to approach this? So it may not even boil down to the question of like, what would you do again? But just listening to this path. Yeah.
Yeah, that's again tricky. I don't really know. I mean,
Yeah.
try and, if you can, imagine what would be best for you. If you're not, so like my situation, I had a tech background. I moved out there and was making connections, but I didn't have good composing skills. I was not good at writing music. Okay, well, I need to learn how to do that. So I have to take time away from making the connections and all that and focus on that. That's what I had to do and what I still have to do. So maybe if someone's in a similar situation, they should think about doing that. Or if it's the other way around, where they're an incredible composer, they have the best composing abilities, they know everything about music theory, they know every orchestration technique, maybe don't spend 100% of your time doing that. Maybe take some time and network and build up those connections, develop yourself as kind of as a businessman for yourself.
Yep. Yeah,
but
that
again,
makes sense.
I don't know.
No, but it's true. Yeah, just there's no blanket. This is, of course, what the process looks like. But the thing I think that's important there is it's being really self-aware and being aware of your specific situation and being objective. I think that's it. Like, I don't know. For me, this conversation I've been really inspired to learn more about what your process has been like. So maybe I just keep kind of going down this path. But I think that it's fascinating to see that you were really tuned into what was happening and you made the proper steps to align yourself with your goal. I think that's the coolest thing. That's just fascinating. And I think that's the importance, is like being really aware of is this putting me in the right direction, or am I just am I not doing it right? Because I
gotcha. I'm still figuring exactly what I want to do out. I know I love writing music, and that's what I want to do. I love writing music for film, but I also love this modern classical genre, and I'm slowly not shifting my focus away from film scoring and writing for TV and basically custom scoring, but developing another part of my career as an independent artist, because I very much enjoy that. I love doing that. I love the music that other people are creating in this genre. It's such a cool community, and it's awesome to be part of it, and I really love doing that. So it's figuring out how to balance that and develop the skills and abilities necessary to do that. And so again, part of that is get up at the crack of dawn and practice piano and do all this other shit you got to do. But I mean, I'm a morning person now, so I do all of my work, especially creative work, in the morning. I can't do work at night. I just can't.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. Most people will say evenings is when they feel. I guess it's just I think it comes down to morning person versus night person. But so you find in the morning is really, you get up early, you feel like you're in a really good creative space to work on music. Yeah.
Well, I used to not be a morning person. I would sleep in, and it wasn't that I've become a morning person because I enjoy getting up early. I still enjoy sleeping in. Who doesn't? But it's because I am more creative in the morning. I don't know how I can measure that, but the music I write at night versus the music I write at morning, the music I write in the morning is way better. The music I write at night is crap. It's just, that's the way it is. And I'm starting to think some of that is when you first wake up in the morning, your head is clear, right? You haven't had the stress of the day wear on you. You haven't become physically exhausted. You haven't had, whether you're working a job or whatever else you're doing, you haven't had people in this ear and this ear and this ear, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Your head is clear. So you're a little freer to think of new ideas. Whereas at the end of the day, at least for me, I'm always kind of worn out. I'm tired. I don't really want to sit at a computer screen and try and come up with these creative ideas. So for me, the morning is absolutely, I do all of my work in the morning. I'm usually done any type of like writing or creative work. I'm usually done by like 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating.
And then,
because it's go ahead. Yeah,
no, that was the end of that.
Yeah, because most people, it's just so funny to hear about what the process is like, because some will say, middle of the night, like wait until.
I've heard that a lot, and I mean, if it works for them, great. I just can't imagine myself doing that.
Right, it comes down to understanding what works best specifically for you. Yeah, because just to have the insight too, to really realize that difference of, okay, if I make music at night, it's crap. If I make music in the morning, it's awesome. You know, just to be tuned in enough there to really see the differences and be able to tune into that and then make the adjustment, I think is important too.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I mean, as a side note, it's quiet in the morning. Like I work out of this basically bedroom studio in my place.
Oh yeah.
So there aren't trash trucks driving around in the morning. There aren't cars honking. No, it's 6 a.m. No one's up. There's no noise. But at night, you got people driving home from work, people out walking their dogs. It's loud. It's distracting. So
yeah,
it's
dude,
nice.
Yeah,
it's peaceful.
Yeah. I see it, man. It's funny. The last episode with Solanka, so he released on Lane 8's record label. If you're familiar with Lane 8, he does this deep house genre, and he's just amazing. And so this guy released on his label, and he mentioned the same thing. So he was mentioning that mornings, that was it. He would get up early, start working on music, super inspired in the morning, Phil. And he mentioned, I think was really interesting, that when you're sleeping, for the neurological processes in the brain or the chemical processes or whatever's going on at that stage when you're sleeping, you're removing this analytical processing, and that's what's happening a lot of times when you're dreaming, because it's bizarre and you're kind of removing a couple of these layers that might be more analytically driven. And in the morning, that's still not necessary. It's kind of still the same state for a little while as you wake up. So he mentioned that he thought that was really beneficial because you're almost still in a dream state in the morning, at least for him, to be creative and to allow for new, interesting ideas to come in, not to be too analytical, but still be coherent enough to work on tracks, which I thought was really cool.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I know. It's
yeah, I'm trying to think of something to add to that, but that was just well said. I'll get up, and after I always start the day with practicing piano. I don't know why. That's just what I do. But then when I'm actually sitting down to write, I kind of have that clear headspace, and I'm not really, it's going to sound weird, but I'm not really thinking about what I'm writing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's
important.
That's part of my process. If I sit down, let's say to write a new modern classical piece, and I'm in my head going, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the chord progression, and this is where the melody is going to go. It just doesn't work. I cannot write that way. Nothing gets done. But if I just sit down at the piano and without thinking, just start moving my fingers, somehow I come up with something that way.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I don't even really think about like keys, what I'm playing in, where the melody's going. I'll just sit down and start playing around with chords and weird harmonies and seeing where it goes.
Right.
And I started to do that a little on this new album. There's some, I don't want to call them weird, but uncommon chord progressions. I know on the first track, the title track, Wilderness, it's all centered around like G major, A flat major 7, and then B flat major, which is pretty weird progression. So on a upcoming project, I've basically already started the next album. It's very much experimenting with harmonies and chord progressions that are not common and kind of seeing where they go. And it's kind of exploring on the fly or just figuring it out. I'm not thinking about what I'm writing. I'm just doing it. I have no idea how to explain that better, but that's what's happening.
No. That's so cool, because I've had conversations around that on the podcast. I've tried to do as well as I could researching those ideas outside the podcast, and I think the best way to describe it is entering a flow state. So there's this concept in psychology that was really coined by this guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and this was like the 90s, right? And he developed, or he didn't develop the idea, but he kind of uncovered, I guess, the idea of flow. But flow is the idea when it can be basketball, it can be golf, it can be composing, it can be whatever. But when you're so engaged in that moment that you're working on something, that time will pass by almost, it'll feel like a minute, but an hour's gone by, and you lose this idea of self because you're so captivated by what you're doing, but it's also not very rigid, if that's a good way to put it. You're just kind of seeing what happens, I think, in a composing sense, kind of as what you've expressed here. My guess is it's something kind of like that. You're allowing yourself to really enter this almost self-induced altered state of consciousness to be really expressive and just open and free with the ideas that come through you, and not rigid and say, okay, the chord progression has to be like this, and this, right? So that's really fascinating, man. My guess is it's something along those lines. So it's really cool. It's really cool to learn about that and then hear it.
Yeah. So I got two things going off that now, as you see me grinning here. It made me think of my track Winter, which is the title track off that first EP. The first chord of that, and basically everything it's centered around, I didn't look at the keyboard. I didn't look where I was putting my fingers or hands. I just dropped my hands on the keyboard, and that was the first chord. No plan. Didn't know what key it was going to be in. I just dropped my fingers and I went, oh, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
And then I started working with it from there. So there was no plan whatsoever with that piece.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, did you set out to say, okay, was it just by chance?
Yeah.
Or did you say, okay, I'm going to start working? Okay, yeah, no, just totally by chance.
That one was purely by chance. They just, it could have hit on some super dissonant, like augmented fourths and all this crap, but no, it just happened to work out with that. And then I started expanding it. And then I started making a little more conscious decisions on where it's going to go. But that first chord was just purely drop my hands on the keyboard and see what happens.
Oh yeah, that's so cool. And I think it's really important you mentioned that too, because it's like this, it's almost laying the foundation. You need to kind of remove yourself and then see what comes. But then from there, it becomes more analytical and precise, right? Once you have that foundation kind of there, then layering or building the composition from there does take kind of more of an analytical approach. But it's that first, like, where is it going to come from out of nowhere to become a track?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it also made me think, when I try to overthink things, I think it brings me back to the couple of music theory courses I did take in college.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in those classes and it was very much like, these are the rules for harmonic progressions. This is like, this is classical music. And my professors would probably hate me for saying this, but I was sitting there going like, fuck the rules. Like,
right.
If I want it to sound like this piece, sure, I'll follow them, but this is boring to me. I want to experiment with these weird, uncommon harmonies and kind of figure out things on the fly. And that may sound like a weird thing to say, but that was kind of how I was viewing it. It was like, I want to, as a composer, experiment with new things. I don't want to follow these sets of rules that I'm learning in this class. Not to say they're not valuable. Like, I'm glad I learned them. But when I'm writing music, no, I do not follow them.
Oh, I think that's really important, because if there's some set scaffolding, right? By, okay, these chords match together well within this set of theory, or this is the chord progression for, this is what this chord progression is called, and here's another chord progression, right? If you're restricting yourself in a sense by what's already been developed, then how unique is that? I mean, it's not. It can be used as a tool to understand that, and then better allow yourself to say, okay, I've just written in 3 chords. I know by theory I can go here, here, and here, but also by ear I can go here, 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 or change this a little bit to kind of add something else. Yeah,
and that's how. That's how new things are created. There was a quote, I think it was from Hans Zimmer's Masterclass. I think I remember seeing this in the trailer for it, where he was saying, rules are meant to be broken. That's how things move forward. It was something along those lines. But I remember hearing that and going, oh, hell yeah. Like, I completely agree. Like, screw it. Let's figure some new stuff out.
Right. Totally, man. Totally. Because that's the exciting part is stumbling across something new, taking what's been previously drawn out and changing it in a certain way, whether that's the inspiration from previous artists, previous songs, or if that's from, a technical foundation, just pushing it to the next limit and adding your own voice. That's when something really unique comes through. That's when, as an artist, it can be, I think, for anyone, more fulfilling, right? Because then it's your specific sound you've developed, and that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah, that's my very early plan for the next album. I have a bunch of pieces written for it. But now I'm trying to figure out instrumentation and arrangements for them. I want to use instruments I've never used before and that aren't traditionally in, well, I guess you can't really say traditionally with modern classical music because it's new, but use instruments that I haven't heard yet used in modern classical music, and use harmonies that I haven't heard before in modern classical music, or use recording techniques that I don't think I've heard in modern classical music yet. So I'm super excited for my new album to come out this next Friday, but I'm also really excited now about the next project. I have a tendency to do that, which is a bad thing, is start projects before I finish the previous one.
That can be challenging, getting like 80% through a track and then being like, ooh, something new is starting. Yeah,
that's a very hard part about being, I feel like any kind of artist is focusing on finishing something, because you never think it's done. You're always like, oh, I could be a little better, or
totally,
and then you just got to finish it.
Yep. Yeah, it's that last like 10%, 20% that can be challenging, because you're right. And John Hayes was mentioning that same thing. It's like he would set all these parameters to say, like, this is when I start this, or personal goals at least, and say, hey, this is when things are going to be done. So then he was set, like he couldn't say, oh, let me go and try and remix everything or change the melody a little bit. I mean, that's it. Like, it's done. And I think that can be really useful for someone like myself. I have the tendency to just leave projects going forever and then not finish, and then they just sit there. So, I mean, that's a great way to approach that.
Yeah, that's definitely something I have to do on the next project. That's something I didn't do on this album. And that's probably why it took like a year to a year and a half to finish, because I kept going, oh no, I can do this better. I can rewrite this or remix this or re-record this. It's like, no, just set the limit. Yeah. You gotta do it when it needs to be done.
Right. Well, it's a balance too, because then it's this perfect balance, because if something's done too soon, then it can't, so it's hard there too. It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think
there's no perfect solution.
I think as artists, we always feel like our music is never as good enough as we want it to be, or at least I've had that feeling where I'll finish a project and go, I'm happy with it, but I feel like it could be better, even though there's not necessarily a way I think it could be better.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, I could record this violin better. I'm just thinking, for some reason, I feel like this can be better, even though I don't necessarily know how to get it there.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And then you share it with people, or people reach out to you, or whatever. Maybe you've shared it with whoever, right? And if someone likes it, you're almost like, oh, that's cool. But I feel like, it's still in the back of your mind too. So
I'm so self-conscious about that.
Yeah.
It's a joy. People have messaged me saying like, oh, this track moved me, and I really appreciate it. And it brings me a lot of joy, because that's my hope when I'm writing it. But I'm also like, oh man, do they like it? Are they being sincere, or like, like, I don't know.
Right. Dude. Oh yeah.
Because I'm always nervous about that. I'm like, do they like it? Do they not? We'll see.
Yeah. I just kind of speak to that same point. I feel like this fits decently well. Like I had the opportunity this last weekend. I went to a show with my girlfriend, and it was a electronic music producer known as Yado. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's kind of progressive housey, deep house stuff. But and it was cool because this is a venue we go to all the time, but he was one of the only artists that was there beforehand. He's pretty famous, and he would stand out right next to the stage where the opener was, and just allow people to come up and chat with him or whatever. And so right away, my girlfriend were like, well, let's go do this. Let's stand in line and chat. And when we got up to speak with him, he was so humble, about his music. And we started asking about, what it was like to tour and have this experience. And, he mentioned that he's having this phenomenal time, but at the same point, he has this son who's back home in Finland, who he wants to go home and see. And I like saw just by talking with him that from an outsider, from a fan, you think, oh my God, to be this huge producer must be amazing. But then you speak with him and you realize, like, he's just a guy. He's probably having those same internal conversations about, like, do these guys really like my music? I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Are they just here? And then at the same point, he's like, I'm touring, which is awesome. That's probably why he started music. And then he's realizing in the moment, he's like, this is great, but like, I also want to be back home halfway around the world to see my kid. It's just, it's funny to take a step back and think about these types of things. From as you mentioned, as the artist, when people reach out to you and you're like kind of in your own head, I think it translates across the board. I don't think it's just you. It's like Hans Zimmer too is probably like, how did I get in this fucking weird place?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, artists are people too. They have the same hopes, dreams, feelings, fears, everything.
Yeah. And then I'm guessing too, it's got to be a mindfuck because when someone is famous, I'm like Hans Zimmer, Deadmau5, like crazy level, I bet you start thinking, do these people just want to talk to me or talk about my music because I'm famous? Or do they, because there's this like rolling ball effect, where someone's famous. So I bet as the artist, you feel like I could put out shit and people are going to like this because people are like, oh, it's from Deadmau5, right? So
I hope not, but yeah, sure.
No, I know. I hope it's not that way, but I bet that's like part of the internal conversation because
I see
you
what
have
you're saying.
fans, it's like, because the fans are like, I'm a fan of Deadmau5. I just love when Deadmau5 puts out a track. I bet that's part of it too.
You wonder if it's more, are they a fan of the music itself or are they a fan of me, the artist and the persona?
Right.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Something neither of us can answer.
I do not have that kind of persona. I am not looked at that way, so I have no idea.
No, but it's funny to hear your side of it, right? Because you have, that's no small feat, man. You have a track on Spotify that has like 150,000 plays or something insane. I mean, that's crazy, for real. And so you're having that conversation with me where you're like, dude, I just, are they being sincere? Are they, I'm sure they are, but like, you kind of have that doubt. And what I'm saying is I think it's across the board. It's just, it's an interesting mind fuck, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. And going off like Spotify numbers, a big question I always have is when I saw that track hit 100,000 streams, my question was, did it hit 100,000 streams because it was on a playlist and people just put it on the background and listened to it? Or were there people individually searching out that track and listening to it because that track means something to them?
Right,
and
right.
That's something with Spotify. I'm always curious. I don't know if there's a way to find that out, if it's where your listen or streams are coming from, if they're coming from just people listening through a playlist, or if it's people searching your music out. Because honestly, that would be, I would hope more and think that would be more valuable, people searching out your music and listening to it because they connect with it, rather than them just putting on like a playlist in the background and your track then gets played.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And if they don't have that metric, they should. I think that's actually really, from an artist perspective, I feel like that would be really insightful. Because you're right. If it's on, I mean, it's still awesome that's on a playlist and people are listening to, if it's a given artist track and then, someone who you really look up to, and then it's your track and then someone else you really, I mean, that's awesome. Right.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's something totally different if someone seeks out that specific track because it speaks to them so deeply that it does make a difference. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, it's a great way to reach a larger audience, I'm sure, with playlists and all. Yeah. But I hope those 150,000 streams came because maybe it was like 100 people just listening to it over and over and over again because they liked it so much.
But they might love it,
Yeah, that was. I know the track, it's Winter. That's easily been my most popular track. That actually got licensed a bunch for just people's own personal film projects. And that's actually a whole new avenue now that I'm starting to branch out into, is sync licensing. Like all the music I now release, all the Winter EP, Close Portraits, that's available for license now. And that's a whole new kind of, that actually might be the coolest thing, because I get to write this music that's purely my own creative ideas, but then people are using it and licensing it in their own projects. So it's kind of like I'm scoring a film, but it's 100% my own idea and creative idea and creative process.
Dude, that is so cool, because you're right. It's totally different. You're not in that scaffolding with, say, a film project or a commercial project where they're saying, emulate this song, right? this is you, and then someone gets to go and grab it.
Yeah,
and
that's really
Yeah.
rewarding when that happens, because it's someone is thinking that specific song
Right.
that I created. It's 100% my idea. They think it fits perfectly, and I usually get to see the end result, and I'm like, damn, that's awesome. Thank you for
That's
using that.
cool.
It worked very well in your video or your film or whatever it was you licensed it for.
Dude, that's awesome. So this is the first I've heard of this. So what's that process like for people out there that are interested in doing that? Like how do you how do you do that to start? Like are there certain websites you go through, or what's that process like?
So for me, it first started out as people just reaching out to me directly, especially with that track Winter. Like I remember it got used in a YouTube video, like a time-lapse video that all of a sudden went viral and got like millions of views.
Oh shit.
And then people were like, hey, I heard your track in that video. Can I license it for mine? So I was handling all these licenses directly. And that's, I mean, one way to do it, but that's hard because you basically have to hope people hear your track and then reach out to you. There's tons of licensing services and websites that have tracks in them that you can license for, like MusicBed, MusicVine, Soundstripe, I think. But those are really hard to get into. I fortunately recently got on board with MusicVine, which is a music licensing platform, and all of those tracks that I've released and listed are now available through that. And so that's a way for filmmakers to kind of find my music that they may not already find.
Oh yeah.
So now like those tracks can be licensed through that service, and I don't have to handle all that directly, which is oftentimes like kind of a pain. I'm happy to do it because I'm still getting paid for my music, but it takes a lot of time to handle and deal with all that.
Right.
But I don't really know how you go about doing that, because that's still kind of new for me. I just, I mean, frankly, I got lucky. I think I applied, if that's the right word, to MusicVine, and they, after a while, got back to me, said they liked my music and brought me on. But it's not something you can just be like, oh, here we go. Like, I'm on board.
Right. Yeah. Sign up with your email, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that's so cool, because I was not familiar with that. I might have seen one website, like one advertisement maybe about licensing your own music. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I didn't look into it, but that's such a cool application, because you're right. You get to just have total control over what you want to do in the track, and then see where it goes, see who picks it up.
Yeah. And that's a big industry. Like there's a lot of money in music licensing.
Yeah. Oh, that's dope.
I'm not getting it
really
yet,
cool.
but there's a lot of money in it.
Dude. But you got to start somewhere, man. If people are already reaching out to you, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Damn, man. Well, that's so sweet, man. This conversation has been super, super cool, man. And you and I are speaking over email, but I really didn't, until talking with you. I mean, this is across the board for everyone, but I really didn't fully get a grasp of what your path was like and what this has been like. And it's really fascinating for me, man. Cause, and I think it's probably very inspiring for a lot of people at home who want to compose, maybe want to make that step into film or television, but don't want to move across the world or the country, and realize, just by hearing your path, it's not necessarily that's a requirement. And I think it's just been really, really cool to hear, man. So dude, seriously,
I mean,
thank you.
Sorry, real quick. I mean, we're in the digital age. Like I've heard like Philip Daniel on here and Jameson, Nathan Jones talk about like you can be anywhere and meet all of these people online, basically. Like I've never met Philip Daniel, Jacob Pavic, Chris Bartels. I've never met them in person, but I've talked to them a bunch online and exchanged ideas and learned about their music. And I recently sent Jacob an email. I was like, dude, you got to tell me about your recording techniques for your latest album. I got to know how you captured these sounds. And he responded and gave me all this really cool info. So it's you don't really have to be anywhere. You can reach out and meet new people online. Now I will say it does help if you're trying to get into film scoring, I think, making those connections in person, but maybe you can do that online too. I just haven't done that part yet. I've
right,
made
right.
the as an independent musician, I've made those connections and contacts simply by communicating with people through social media or email or anything like that.
Right. Well, dude, I mean, just speaking to that, as you mentioned, it's just like a digital age, as you say. And for this podcast, I was able to just get to know you. You know, we're talking over Instagram, talking over email, and now suddenly we're doing a podcast. And, you know, it's been the same thing. I feel super fortunate that I can have these conversations, and it's all only happened because of things like Instagram. Like that's it. 100%.
It is good for something.
It is. You know, all that scrolling actually became something cool. So
no, it's great that you're doing this. Thank you for creating this podcast and doing it. The episodes are wonderful. They're very insightful. It's a great way of connecting creatives and the community as a whole.
Awesome.
That's I mean, after I heard that first interview you did with Philip Daniel, I was like, damn, I gotta just talk with this guy. Like,
hell yeah,
awesome.
thanks, man. Dude, I really sincerely appreciate it, man, because it was just totally random. Like, I was making music and I kind of had the idea, and my buddy was like, the next week, talk about weird coincidences like we were talking about in this story. I'd been making music for a while. I thought about doing this podcast, then kind of sidebar. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And the next week, my buddy writes me, he's like, dude, you should do a podcast. I was like, oh, the universe. I got it. So now I got to do this. So yeah, man, I appreciate it. Hell yeah. But dude, we I knew we were talking about this before we started recording, but we just knocked out an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh,
dude,
damn.
It just flew by, right?
It's 9:30. It's my bedtime. I got to get up at 5 tomorrow.
Oh, dude, but fuck yeah, man. But hey, one thing, if you want to knock another one of these out too, seriously, like 6 months, a year, we were talking about this earlier, but I will be moving into a studio now for the listeners out there.
Oh, nice.
2 weeks. Yep. I'm going to be streaming it in a better fashion. So I'm going to actually stick to the streams. They're all going to be on YouTube. Screw Twitch. It was a mess. So it's all going to be on YouTube. So if you want to do it, dude, in the future, we'll still stream like this on Skype, but we'll have the visual component out there.
Absolutely. I hope to have some very interesting things to share with the experimentation on the new album and all that. So I would absolutely love to come back, and I look forward to your future episodes. Keep it up.
Yeah, dude. Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. We will most definitely knock out another episode.
All right. Sounds good.
Hell yeah.